our special guest has some amazing information to share. I'm super, super excited about this Power Hour. It's the second of 4, so we have 4 going on over January and February, and of course they're all free of charge, and I'm super grateful to our presenters because it's all volunteer. They volunteered their time and their expertise to share with us through these 4 Power Hours. And I was just saying to Ujal, everyone's getting a bit competitive, our presenters, because I check the registrations and see how many people have registered, and I was at like 39, and then I was at 43, and Ujal has like raised the bar. So Ujal was at like, I think as of this morning, he's at about 52 registrants. And so I always let the other presenters know, and I get like, no, like they're getting competitive. So poor Dr. Maida, he's number 4, the last in the series on, I think it's February 25th. And he just dropped in the room here. So he's the magician. He's actually a dentist, but also a magician, and we'll be talking about attention and how attention works and how he uses attention to do his magic, let's just say. And then he uses it in his practice as well. So that's going to be a good one, but he's getting a little bit worried because Ujal's like raised this bar to 52 registrants. So be sure to check those out if you're interested in magic and attention. I think it would be good. If you're a teacher, educator, I think this would be a good one to also press play. We are recording these. I hope some weird thing happened on Zoom today, but we can't record. So we're recording it elsewhere. But we'll send it to you. So share it, don't share it, relook at it. You're welcome to do that. And if you are an educator, teacher, tutor, I know you've asked, can I use it with my students? Absolutely. This is all for the greater good. So please share away, use away. I think that's okay with Ujal too. I probably should have asked you, Uj, if that was all right.
Oh, it's great.
Before we jump in, I am going to give you some housekeeping items because I always forget and then I get in trouble from my team afterwards. We've got our 4 Power Hours. Go to our website if you'd like to register. There's 2 more. Today is for students, parents. Next week is not next week. The 4th of February is for parents. Talking about really high potential. Like my kiddo is super smart. Why aren't they doing well at school? So we're going to be addressing the why behind that. You might be surprised at the answers. And then, of course, we have Dr. Maida coming in on the 25th to do the magic show with all of you. And we have my admin team just sent me a note this morning. We're actually, for the first time ever, capping our coaching program for the rest of the year. We have 15 positions left for students or adults. So if you know anyone who's interested, we're going to offer that to our webinar participants. And so I will be sending that information at the end of the webinar because I'm still waiting for it. But basically, we're giving a reduction, 5 sessions for the price of 4, and then a $100 reduction off of our intake fee. And then we're stopping for the rest of the year because we've hit our threshold and we want to do good work and not just pile up our clientele. So that's something. We have our Brain Hub Academy you can join. That's free. We have questionnaires on our website about executive functioning for adults, for kiddos. And you are welcome to, and a post-secondary one, you're welcome to complete those and find out your executive strengths and needs. That is always a fun one to do as a family, and then compare the results. So interesting to see how you see yourself, how others see you, right? Super interesting. We have a free consult going on. You can book with one of our learning specialists. Kristen's here today. She's one of our learning intake specialists. We have a Facebook support group that's starting to become quite popular. It's specializing in ADHD. It's called Know Better, Do Better, Understanding ADHD Kiddos. And that's not our entire clientele, but it certainly is a large majority because we know executive functioning deficits and ADHD are close cousins. And that's all I've got to say, because I'm going to introduce you to the person you are actually here to see, which is my dear friend and super brain, Ujal Thakor. So Ujal and I have been friends for a very long time. He is a gem of a human being and also has a Ferrari brain. And I didn't even really know this was happening in his life, because it was all kind of like hush hush for a while, because he had to be careful about what he shared. But it took him more than 5 years to make it on what he calls the Super Bowl of trivia. He wrote he wrote a test 5 years ago. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. He wrote a test 5 years ago, and then again 2 years ago. And the second test earned him 2 online auditions for Jeopardy, which was his dream. Then he got the call from the official game, which gave him about a month to prepare for the most challenging series of tests in his life. And as you get to know Ujal, you will know that he has written a lot of tests. If you look at the letters behind his name, he's written a lot of tests and been very successful. But I venture to say he was very nervous about this one. He bought 30 textbooks, mostly at high school level, on subjects he needed to brush up on. He also played along with hundreds of games, tracking his score along with his strengths and weaknesses. So please join us today. Join me in welcoming Ujal. First of all, Uj, thank you for sharing your time with us today and your expertise. And I know you have a lot of great things to say about testing and studying, but also about the parallel of this for life, because life is a test. So I'll pass it over to Ujal. If you have any questions, you want to chime in, please use the chat. Kristen and I are monitoring the chat so Ujal can focus on his presentation. Welcome, Ujal. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Samantha. Thanks for the amazing introduction. It's almost like I wrote it for myself, so I'll take all the credit on that one. Really excited to be with everyone here this morning. So thanks all for attending. And exactly today I want to talk to you about how to study like a pro. Bit of background on myself. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm a director of strategy with FYI Doctors. You might have seen our optometry clinics around the city. I did my undergrad in business at the U of Calgary, and I did my MBA at Queen's out in Kingston. I also did a designation called a Chartered Financial Analyst a few years ago. I'll talk to you a bit about that later on. So I feel like I've had more than my fair share of time in exam rooms for sure. And more recently, and maybe a bit bigger, I was in one of the bigger tests of my life when I had the privilege almost exactly a year ago of filming on the Jeopardy stage in front of 11 million people. So today what I want to talk to you about is study skills. So we'll go a bit through my Jeopardy journey, and Samantha had a wonderful introduction to how that went, and what that means for you preparing for your big day. And I'll keep talking about things like exams, job interviews, presentations. A lot of this is going to apply not just to, I know a lot of you are in the middle of finals right now. It isn't just final exams. There's a lot of times when preparation and study and all come into focus. I'll share some of the tips and tricks that worked for me in how to study smart, and then we'll do a bit of a review at the end and see, get some information from you all and what works for you, and hopefully able to talk through what we learn in the hour here. This is a quote I referred to a lot during the studying, and I think it applies again to preparing for anything big. Things can seem daunting or like a long time and a lot of effort. So the motivation you need, that's what gets you going. You need to keep that, but habit is what keeps you going. So that comes through discipline and using the right techniques, but also knowing yourself, adapting to what's working for you, changing on the fly, and just feeling like you're taking care of yourself, getting yourself ready as you can. And that's what's going to keep you going and avoid all the roadblocks and hurdles that come up, in preparing for any of these. So preparing for things in school and life, it's not meant to be easy. You can have the best plan in the world, but things beyond your control can really throw you off. So it's important to be resilient, stay motivated, and to have good habits in managing those things so they don't throw you off your game. So before we kick off, I wanted to do a poll for everybody and just get a sense, how do you all prepare for an exam?
I like the last one. Red Bull and cramming at 11 p.m. the night before. Hopefully we don't have too many participants for going down that avenue, but I know it exists.
Do you want me to launch that, Luch?
Oh, sorry. Yes, please, Samantha. Thanks.
Sorry, that was my...
I can do it right there. I got it.
There we go.
Perfect. And I'll admit, I've done all of these, and sometimes at the same time.
Sometimes at the same time.
I knew there was going to be a few. It looks like we got 3 so far with Red Bull and cramming. I know it happens, right? I've been there. I don't want to admit it, but it's happened before.
And it might be the right thing. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, should I end that
Right.
poll?
Great. I'd love to see the answers here. Yes.
Here we go.
All right. Oh, I can't see them on my screen, so I'll ask for...
Oh,
Here
sure.
we go. Perfect. I got it. All right. So half of you, methodical, active, studying, and practice. Excellent. If we have to say which is probably better for you, I'd say that's the one. And then study groups, definitely an important factor. And maybe that's part of your own studying, whether it's formal or informal. Remember things from class? Absolutely. Sometimes if you're wired to just hold on to information and facts, excellent. But yeah, if a third of us are talking about Red Bull and cramming, we're all guilty of it at some point. So nothing wrong with that answer either. So thanks for that, Samantha. So, we're going to talk about study skills and tips and all, but I just wanted to give a bit of context to my Jeopardy journey. I think I find it interesting, of course, and hopefully you all do too. And again, thanks, Samantha, for that great introduction. But since I've been on the show, I've had a lot of people ask about the journey and my experience, and I could spend this whole hour talking about just being in the studio. It was so much to take in. But really, how I prepared for the tests, and there are tests. So the first thing you need to do, and anyone can do it, you can go onto the Jeopardy website this afternoon and write what they call the anytime test. Try it out. It's 50 questions at 15 seconds each, just to hammer out all these answers. And they're fast-paced. You feel the pressure. What makes this a bit scary is you feel like if you don't do well, the whole process might stop for you right there. So that's a bit of a mental block to get through. But the tests really prepared me for the real deal. They cover all kinds of topics. It gave me a chance to see, was I preparing the right way? Am I using the right tools and books? Am I focusing on the areas where I need to strengthen my knowledge? This is a great way to check that out. It was really important that I took them seriously. They're fun tests. The people who work at Jeopardy and administer them are great. They make it enjoyable. But this is the most important part of moving forward. So a lot of importance rests on it. You're competing against a lot of things, the questions themselves, your own nerves, and even you're competing against other people because there's only a limited number of spots. Out of about 300,000 people who apply, 400 get through. It's a 1 in 1,000 chance to make it all the way to the stage. It's tough. We also got to do for the last round auditions. It's a mock game. It's an interview. It's making sure you seem good on TV because it still is a TV show. And it takes another part of your brain and another kind of skills. So you had to prepare differently for that than just reading books. In that one, we had to be able to answer hard questions with a smile on our face, talked about ourselves, but be ready with the buzzer. And I was lucky that I read a few articles that helped me prepare, especially about not letting my nerves get the better of me that day. And outfits. You have to take multiple changes of clothes to the actual studio because if you win, they film 5 games in a day. And you have to be ready to change your clothes in 10 minutes and be ready for tomorrow's game, which is actually filmed half an hour later. So that took a lot of brain power and time that I'd rather have been studying, but it's part of playing along. And Samantha did a great job explaining the journey. So yeah, I tried 5 years ago in April of 2017. Didn't get through, which happens to most people. After a few years, I tried again. I got through in May. I did the first test where they said you've done well enough to try this new test in October. And then my audition was in May. So there's about 6 or 7 months between each of these. And then another 8 months of just silence and thinking, well, maybe it didn't happen. And then just before the holidays last year, I got a call from California. You're going to be on the show in 4 weeks. Get on a plane. And that was it. That gave me 4 weeks over the holidays and New Year to just prepare. And then in January of last year, that's where I was. So it was no fast process, long journey just to get up onto that stage and no guarantees at any point. But I got to do it. I got to achieve a major life goal and stand on a stage. I got to meet Ken Jennings and stand at the podium, which it's a pretty rare event, but it was really exciting. So I just wanted to show you what it felt like. And even now when I watch this clip, I still kind of get that feeling in my chest of the excitement.
From the Alex Trebek stage at Sony Picture Studios, this is Jeopardy! Let's meet today's contestants. A director of strategy from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Ujal Thakor. A writer and legal assistant, originally from Louisville, Kentucky, Christy Bauer. And our returning champion, a homemaker from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Margaret Shelton, whose one-day cash winnings total $16,600. And now, hosting Jeopardy, Ken Jennings.
Thanks, Johnny. Welcome, everyone.
So, as I said, I still get butterflies watching that. It seems a bit surreal, but I did it. I got to be on that stage, and it was just the culmination of a lot of work, knowledge, practice, and luck. Absolutely, all of those came into play. So what I want to talk to you now is a bit about tips and tricks to study smart. What worked for me? And this is not just for Jeopardy, but as you saw, I've had the chance to be in university for a good amount of time. I got to do that other designation, which I'll talk a little bit about in detail. And I wanted to share with you what worked for me. And hopefully some of these are things that you all do even today. And then they kind of validate what's working for you now. And no two people are alike. So I'm sure you do things that I don't, and I do things that you don't. But I'd love to be able to share ideas around what's good, what works, and what gets people as ready as they can for the big event. So the first thing, and I'll keep tying back to this, is a study plan. Everything you want to do, all the techniques, none of it's going to work if you don't have a realistic plan. And I want to emphasize realistic. What I've got here is when I was doing that Chartered Financial Analyst designation, you get the chance to write the exam only once a year. Doesn't matter if you're sick that day, too bad. And there's 3 exams, so 3 years with 1 exam. So in terms of thinking, this is it, this is the big one, I definitely felt that what it meant is in the 3 to 4 months before, I was studying really regularly. And the only way I was able to keep myself on track was a plan. As you can see, I had different groups and topics and tools I was going to use. And the most important thing was this plan is not going to hold. Nothing goes exactly according to plan. You miss a day, you're not feeling well, maybe something takes longer to practice and get through. So I made sure that I built lots of flexibility into here. And I think that's important when I say realistic. How much time is it giving you to study as a buffer? Are you expected to be studying 8 hours a day? And is that realistic? Or are you giving yourself maybe 1 hour a day and over a longer time? So when you're building this out, think about all the different tools you have at your disposal and how much time you actually want to have. Give yourself enough time for each part. One thing you'll see, and it's a bit small, but you'll see do mock exam at the end, right above those gray bars. I keep doing mock exams because if you just keep studying and thinking, I'll remember that, and then wait a couple of months before you test yourself, you might be missing out, both on saying, yeah, I get it, it's sticking, or saying, I'm still struggling with a topic, with an idea or a fact, and I need to spend another couple of hours on something. It's much easier to do that when you've got time to do it instead of the exams coming in 2 days and I just don't have enough hours in the day. So make sure you're including revision and review a lot in all of these exams. Use different tools. So again, Jeopardy, it's a test. Yeah, there's a couple of different elements to it, but you have a lot of tools at your disposal. You've got your regular classes, access to your teachers and professors, your study groups and your classmates. There's your textbooks. There's millions of websites online that you can use. Take advantage of all the knowledge that you have because each one is going to work for you a bit differently. For me, as you can see, Samantha mentioned I bought about 30 books. Here's just a small selection in my hotel room when I was in LA. I knew that I wasn't strong in a lot of different topics, so I bought books about that. The advantage I had is you don't need to have PhD level knowledge about any one of them. It's a bit lighter. So I bought, as you can see, they're meant for grades 8 through 12, these books. I went to Amazon and Indigo and just bought like crazy. And you can see some of the topics. I didn't know US presidents really well, or Greek civilization, or the book with flags in the middle about geography. I spent many, many hours reading these just so that I would have those facts in my head available for when I needed them. So I did have a lot of textbooks, but I got to watch a lot of TV. I watched hundreds of games of Jeopardy too. So nothing wrong with getting to just enjoy yourself in front of the TV, but it's a bit different when you're fighting with it too. And this kind of when I talk about archive questions, a lot of you have that opportunity, right? I remember in my undergrad, often a professor would say, I use what's called a question bank. So maybe I'm going to ask you 50 questions, but I got 300 that I pull from, and they would sell them, or you'd be able to access them. And if you just go through those, it's not just trying to memorize the answer, but saying, you're going to ask me all of these things. I know that if I've studied them, I have a very good chance of doing well on an exam. Same thing for a job interview. If you have any way of finding out what is it that you want me to show up like, maybe the job posting gives you some clues, use that, take that as an advantage, and make that define where you're focusing all your efforts and time. One interesting point, that CFA, that once a year exam, has a written component. My writing is terrible, but I knew that I have the option of either being in the room and writing really slowly so it's neat and losing time, or practicing my writing a month before. And I did that. That took a lot of nerves and pressure off my plate when it came to exam day. So when I talk about archive questions and Jeopardy questions, there's a great website called Jeopardy Archive, and they take every game that's ever been played in the last 40 years and put it up here so you can go through, play along. And I would do this and try and get as many as I could right. If I got it wrong, I would stop. I would Google or Wikipedia the answer, because often that was where it was, and it worked really well for me. So this, as you can see, is an example of what one of the games might have looked like. And here's just a snippet. I went through many games in a season, and if you zoom out, this is part of one season. And I'd say I did well over 500 of these games while I was practicing in those 4 weeks leading up to filming. So practice. So if there's one really key point that I want you to take away from this, it's that you need to use multiple methods to prepare, especially for an exam. One single approach is not going to be enough. So you want to think about how well you retain. Think about a time when you've had enough sleep, you're relaxed, you've got time before the exam, and how well you retain what you've been studying. Versus, what about when you're in the middle of a lot of assignments? It's late nights, you haven't eaten well, you just finished one exam and you're about to go to the next one, or even if you're just not feeling it today. For whatever reason, you just can't get through a page of reading, you're having trouble focusing, and you'd be better off going for a walk. Think about those, and it really helps to be aware of that for yourself. An example I think of is sometimes I'll meet someone, they'll tell me their name, and instantly I've forgotten it because I didn't repeat it back to them. But I know if I had written it down, for example, if I was, putting down notes, that activates a different part of your mind. And that might be a better way to retain. So what that means is there's not just one way that's always going to work for you, and you want to be able to be flexible on that. So does it sound like your brain's going to absorb information the same way in every situation? Probably not. So make sure you practice your ability to study in different ways. And that's the best way you're going to hold on to as much information as you want. Use books, the old questions, look for trends and patterns. If you're going up to an exam where you kind of know some of the main topics, what are some of the key ideas and themes and facts? That helps you to study efficiently and make the most of your time. Sometimes what works is what I call brute force. Just read, and memorize. That can work too. The other thing I talked about, writing and penmanship, that had nothing to do with the content of the exam, but I really needed to practice that. For Jeopardy, I had to practice wagering strategy. It's a game, and maybe all three contestants know the answer on a question, but if you can wager, that might make the difference in the outcome. The buzzer, I spent a lot of hours practicing the buzzer because for the same reason, we might all know the answer, but only the first person to ring in gets the chance to give that answer. So as you see on the slide here, I've got keep focused on long-term studying, right? Make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to think through, but also as you get close to the exam, maybe change. You don't have time to have long discussions and readings. You need to just get to practicing your exams, right? It's okay to be both slow and steady and to cram. They can both work to your advantage. Repeat, read it once, review it, and test yourself. You can read a chapter, and a lot of textbooks will have end of chapter questions for you. Try them. Maybe you realize, I didn't quite get that paragraph that I read 5 minutes ago. Let me read it right now and do it a week later. What's stuck? What did I kind of struggle with and am I forgetting? It's better to keep thinking back about how well you're able to retain that information so you've got the comfort and the time to do it instead of cramming. Second, rely on your team. You're not studying alone. And I know in our poll, half of you said, yeah, I like to kind of do it methodically, active studying, and that's perfectly great. But you can really bolster that by using your team around you. You have a lot of people. You've got the people around you, your classmates, your teachers and professors, your friends and family. Some of them know the knowledge because they're in the class, and if they don't, they all want you to succeed. Take advantage of that and use their support. It could be something like they're taking stuff off your plate. They're helping you with food and all that, just so you have more time to focus when you really need to. Use that team around you, and then take care of yourself. None of this is going to work that well if you're not feeling physically and mentally good. You're eating well, exercising well, getting rest and relaxation, because those are just as important to taking care of yourself. A few more tips and tricks. I've talked about this. Test yourself often. Make sure you remember what you just read. I'm very guilty of, I'll read something and realize my eyes were scanning the page, but I wasn't processing it. I wasn't thinking it through and questioning what I was reading to actually say, yeah, I get it. I get a concept. I get a fact. I understand whatever I'm supposed to be learning. Look for Pavlovs. I'll talk about those in a second, what those are. But really use time savers. You can use shortcuts and time savers. There's no shame in that if they're getting you to the right line of thinking. Cheat sheets. I know that, as I mentioned, writing something down activates a different part of your brain. Making the cheat sheet before the test is effective as having it on your desk during your study and during your exam. Writing is an incredibly important skill for that. Most importantly, adapt. That's why I've got the shark picture. Sharks only stay alive when they're swimming forward. If they don't last. So go with what works for you today, but keep moving forward. If there's a certain technique that's not working, if you want to study something that's just a bit more familiar because you don't feel like you're ready to take on new knowledge, perfectly fine, but always be moving forward. And testing the test. Do you know what the test is going to be like? Do you know the structure? Is it multiple choice? Is it written? Is it going to cover units 1 to 5 or only unit 5? Make sure you're thinking about that so you're as ready as possible. As I mentioned, you want to use these not only in exams, but a whole host of situations in school, in work, and in life. You'd be amazed at just how much a lot of this applies in your day-to-day life. And it's okay to just, when it becomes overwhelming, just put the brakes on a bit and don't ask too much of yourself if you're just not feeling it. So I talked about something called Pavlov's, and I think a lot of you probably know who Pavlov is, but he was a Russian psychologist, and he devised an experiment where he would ring a bell for his dogs, and then as he rang the bell, he'd feed them. Pretty simple stuff. And then what he did over time is realize I could ring the bell, and even without food, the dogs start looking hungry, they start salivating, and they're expecting it. So they made these connections in their head, and that was one of the big findings that he's very famous for. Well, for Jeopardy, and I think this applies to a lot of things in exams too, a lot of the contestants do that. We call them Pavlovs. And what it means is you learn some of the most common topics and questions and key words. And the trick is you want to find things that might trigger an idea in your brain that help you shortcut to the right answer. An example would be, if you see that one on the left, if I hear anything about ballet and Russia or Swan Lake and all, what I'm doing is it's called triangulating. I'm taking a few pieces of information and thinking the blank they want me to fill in is probably Tchaikovsky. And it works both ways. If I know 2 or 3 of those dots, I could probably get the other ones. And that was the shortcut that a lot of people rely on. Same thing if I hear about seas and oceans and gods and Roman gods and Triton, I'm thinking Neptune. Most likely that's going to be, Poseidon. But most likely that's going to be the answer. And instead of thinking through the whole question, I'm seeing trigger words and keywords, and my mind is jumping to the right answer quickly. It's efficient. It saves you time. It's not a shortcut in a negative sense. It's a shortcut in I'm getting there with as little effort as I need to. A lot of you have probably seen this mnemonic, the names of the Great Lakes. Again, Jeopardy asks a lot of questions about Great Lakes. They seem to love it for some reason, even though the writers don't live anywhere near them. But you've probably seen this one, Holmes. The first letter of each lake spells out the word Holmes. Well, great, because sometimes I can only remember 4 of the lakes. And if I say, well, I remember H-O-M and S, but I know there's an E, that's a lot quicker for me to realize, oh, E, obviously that's Lake Erie. But if I didn't have that mnemonic in my head, I'd be thinking, I know there's 5, but I have no idea, no clue and no shortcuts to it. That's why I loved using mnemonics to get to those answers quickly. And sometimes straight out memorization. Again, if you watch Jeopardy, there's almost always questions about presidents, and they ask them in many different ways. So I had to memorize all 46 presidents. The number of times I would have to recite them in order, forwards and backwards, where they were born, how did they die, what were they famous for. That was just memorization. There's no shortcut, there's no trick. I just had to read and learn that list, and all the details around them. So there's sometimes it is just straight out memorization, but that takes a lot of brain power and a lot of time. So you want to do that only when necessary. So I'll ask a question for you, and you can either unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. But what's your secret studying hack? Do you have something that really helps you be as efficient and quick as possible? So I'll see if people have anything they want to add here.
For biology, I go through and create a whole system. So if it's like the digestive tract or something, I'll start with whatever's happening in the mouth, and then I go through this whole steps to follow through the whole thing to then find whatever part I need to for an answer on a test or whatever I'm being questioned on.
Perfect. I love that, because that means that if you're asked about something in the middle of that process, you're thinking, well, I've already done step 2 and I know step 3 must only be this. So you're shortcutting yourself to the right answer. That's brilliant.
In the
Dr.
chat
Mehta
here,
says,
we have treats, writing an essay about it for myself to read over. We've got reading over the exam before I start answering, so actual test taking strategy there. Cheat sheets, then quiz myself. Deck of cards with progressive days to study. Get one wrong, move back a day. Add in challenge cards.
I love it. I've never heard of that method. The
Lettner method, is that Lisa? Lettner? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some great videos online.
Yeah.
And it's really concrete. So check it out.
Cool. Thank you.
I love that idea, because a lot of Jeopardy contestants use flashcards, and this to me seems like taking that to the next level. Flashcards are great to say, name of a king and where did they rule, name of a Shakespeare play and who was the main character. But this seems like it forces you to really test yourself continuously and challenge yourself, which is great.
And then adding the challenge cards to it takes it up a level as well. I can send it to you, Sam, and you can send it to everybody if you like.
Sure. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that method too.
Listening to music.
Yes.
I'd like to know what you think about that, Ujal. Listening to music helps motivate me. It also makes you feel good, right? Which is proved to help.
Absolutely. And you know what? It works for so many people, and it doesn't work for me. But the good thing is I know that. If I'm, whether it's at work and I'm writing through something that takes a lot of kind of in-depth thinking or studying, I can't do music because I let myself get too easily distracted by it. But on the reverse, absolutely, for what Phineas is saying here, if it keeps you going, it gives you a sort of rhythm and it brings your mood up, absolutely use it. Definitely. Yeah. Colors with words association, definitely. Again, when I talk about Pavlov's and triangulation, sometimes it's not a word, it's an image. And just that image, whether it's of a process like a biological process or of a certain country, that can really help you. It just helps you get to those answers a lot more quickly. Yeah, practice. Alexandra's got memorization, brain dumps, practice questions, definitely. There's nothing wrong with just, as I called it, brute force, just putting in time over and over again. And I was going to ask about people's choice for music. So if there's an ADHD study music playlist that's been tested to say this is what works for the right environment, perfect. And practice for testing my dreams during the sleep. Yeah, as long as you're giving yourself the right answer in your dreams too, that's excellent. So I love these. There's some, right off the bat, I've already learned a couple more techniques that I've never really thought about. I think it's brilliant.
Visualization is kind of going back to what Dina is saying, Dinah, I'm not sure, is like that visualization piece, especially I think if you're prone to anxiety, to sort of do the play-by-play before your exam. Like actually, did you use that at all, Uj, during your, like before you get on stage, did you do any visualization of the
did.
buzzer and the room and the smells and the...
Yeah, I had those weird, I had nightmares, literal nightmares about being at the podium weeks before, where it's, and a couple of pictures will make more sense, but I felt like the floor under me was just rising and falling like crazy while I was trying to answer. It was just this weird environment, but better to do it, get it through in your dreams and just work it out and say, it's not going to be that bad. So I think absolutely I did that, but I also did active visualization. I would picture myself walking on a stage, standing there, even I tried to look, and for blog posts and pictures, when I'm standing there, where's the board? Where's the host? Where's my buzzer? Because the more you can do that, the less surprised you are, even with little things on the day of. And I think avoiding those surprises, they're not bad, but they take your attention away and they take energy away. So the more you can get ahead of it, the better.
Great feedback.
Great. Well, thanks for the answers. I think these are some great
you.
ideas, and keep adding to it. Absolutely. So another technique that's critical, and I mentioned it when I talked about the study plan, track your performance. So the example for me, that CFA exam, what I would do, I've got my plan, I've got 4 months down the road till the big exam in June. Great. I would just start by writing one practice exam with no knowledge, no nothing. And I know my third year I was doing it, I got 45%, which just crushed me. How can it be that bad? And that's fine. I have 4 months to bring that number up. But I didn't just write that one exam and then never do it again. Every couple of weeks, I would sit down for 3 straight hours and write out a whole practice exam. Reason being, I would see that 45% get better. Maybe a couple of points, maybe it's 45 to 47 to 50. Maybe I had a big jump to 60, 65, but it was always moving forward. And the other part of that is, well, where am I strong and weak? And any exam that has multiple topics and components, you need to know that because you've only got limited hours to study and you want to spend them wisely. So I would say, well, great, topic A and topic C, I'm getting 80s and 90s. I don't need to spend much more time than just keep it fresh. But topic D, man, I'm getting 30 and 35%. I need to spend a few days on that. But that tracking, that charting it out, marking it down, really made sure that I was using my time as best as possible, because we don't all have all the time in the world to get ready for these kind of things. It also keeps you motivated. If you don't see progress, even if you're progressing, you don't know it. No one's telling you. And it's very hard to just feel it. You need to see some statistics and numbers on that. And the best way is just testing yourself. But that's where my motivation came from. If I was tired, if I was getting bored of things, it really said, no, everything I'm doing is helping me out. And I get to focus on where my weak spots are. And it also helped me to feel less surprised on exam day when I said, look, I know I'm not going to ace a certain topic, and that's fine. When I write those questions, I'm just going to get through as best I can and not let them throw me off track. That might be where I don't get my 100%, and I'm fine with it. Sometimes a term we use at work a lot is good enough. Certainly not when you're doing, we're eye doctors, so we don't do it for the patient care, but sometimes good is good enough. 80% of this one topic, it's only worth a few points. Good enough. Move on. I think it's critical to do that, but don't hide from your weak spots. Just because you don't like a topic or you find it challenging, don't ignore it, because it's just going to come back to hurt you on test day. So get out of your comfort zone. Find out where you're not strong and where you're not comfortable. Get in there. But the nice thing is studying by yourself, with a group, with your teachers, whatever it is, that's safe space. Ask hard questions. Ask things you think, I should know this, but I'm kind of worried about asking it. There's no better safe space than when you're preparing for these things with yourself and with the right team around you. So preparing for your big day, it's coming. There's nerves. There's so many things that aren't about the content of what you're being tested on, but how am I going to do? What am I going to do about it? This is a quote I return to a lot during the practice, and even nowadays I do it at work. Not the battles that we lose that bother me, it's the ones that we don't suit up for. So it's this great show from the late 1990s called The West Wing. But what it meant to me was, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how I'm going to perform on stage. I don't know how the game's going to go. I can't predict who I'm going to be competing against. At the time, if any of you was watching Jeopardy and remember Amy Schneider, she was on a huge run, just dominating every game. And every one of us was thinking, I do not want to be up against her. And we had no idea until the day we were in the studio and realized she was no longer there. She had lost a game. Great. She's out of the way, but there could be somebody even better. So all those things are out of my control. I know that. I can't control what the questions are going to be that day. I don't know what time I'm going to be filming, but that's not going to bother me if I feel like I've done my best to prepare for it. That was my motivation, saying I'm doing everything I can to be the best I can be on that day. So where you feel like a lot's resting on the outcome of a test, you're feeling pressure to perform, you want to be comfortable that you've prepared to the best of your ability and avoid feeling any regrets. I'm going to jump to a bit of what it was like in the middle of my game. Screen's working? Excellent. Okay.
Ujal,
Who is Spike Lee?
yes.
Calendar 200.
With more job security than some, United States senators have to face re-election after this many years in office? Ujal.
What is 6?
Right.
Calendar 400.
The answer there is the first daily double. You found it right away. You only have $400, but
Make it 1,000.
wager up to 1,000. Here we go. Your clue. Often confused with locusts, these insects occur in chronological broods of 13 and 17 years.
What are cicadas?
That's correct, and you have $1,400.
Fits and starts 200.
Forrest Mars Sr. made a sweet start selling these candies in 1941. Ujal.
What are M&Ms?
You got it.
Fits and starts.
So that felt pretty good. I started out coming out of the gate strong, really felt good, and while it was early, it's still a game, and I thought, I haven't won the game by any means. We're only a few clues in, but I felt really good, and that gave me some energy and some motivation and focus to say, let's keep going. Something I'm doing is working right, keep it up. So if you're in an exam and you find you nail the first section, say, don't just keep moving forward. Give yourself a couple of seconds to think, okay, I got this, I'm good. Use that as a motivator, as a positive force. It's important for your mood and your energy level for the rest of whatever you're doing. If you're in a job interview for anything, and you have a couple of great answers and they're sitting across and saying, yeah, that's excellent. Use that. You've got momentum, you've got a good mood and a vibe going on. Take advantage of it. Even I found when I was writing exams, and Dr. Mehta mentioned that on the chat, read the whole exam, top to bottom. Maybe you want to start on section 5 because you say that's an easy win. Let me just get those quick points out of the way. I know I've got them in the bag and I feel good. Do it. If the structure of a test lets you do it, absolutely. Just enjoy yourself on that. Take the quick wins and use them as fuel for what you're doing next. So a few things that work for me, kind of summarizing what I've talked about so far. As I said, using various study tools is important. Your brain is going to change how it works every day. So make sure you're adapting to it. It depends on your mood or energy and even the topic at hand that you're trying to study, right? Have perspective. Is this the most important exam of your life? Maybe it actually is. And that's fair to say it is. There's nothing wrong with that. But not every quiz and test and assignment is. So give yourself a bit of perspective and say, is this life or death? What's the worst thing that could happen if it doesn't go well? Manage your anxiety. It doesn't mean you get to give yourself a pass and not try your best. But it does mean give yourself a bit of an understanding of what's at stake there, right? And manage your anxiety. I'll talk a little bit about some tricks I used on that as well. Right in the middle, realistic study plan. Again, I can't hammer enough realistic. Make sure you really are designing a plan that doesn't require you to work 36 hours a day, right? Balancing your long-term studying and keeping things fresh. Again, you might have done really well and understood a topic back in April, but now it's June and you're writing your exam. Cram it. It's fine. You'll probably just reignite what's going on in your head and some of the ideas you already know. Your brain is a sponge. Take advantage of that. Focus. I know a lot of people hate the term boil the ocean. What it means is just don't try and do everything all at once. It's just too big. Keep a focus on what you're studying, where you're spending your time, and just being the best you can with what resources you've got at hand. So again, knowing what you can control when you're trying to manage your anxiety. Who are you competing against? Is it a clock? Is it people? Is it just the content? It's good to know that, right? I know when I was preparing, knowing my limits too. You only have so many hours in a day, and you can't not sleep. That's a critical part. Being rested, relaxed, taking care of your physical and mental health are all critical, right? Visualization. So absolutely, I spent a lot of time visualizing where I'd be. This picture, even to this day, gives me just such nerves in my stomach because this is what it's like standing right at the podium. You can see the screen, you can see the host podium is on the right. This is what it's like. And just doing this lots and lots of times, looking at these pictures, got it out of my system. I felt like, oh, okay, it's going to be there's all these different moving parts and lights and sounds and crazy stuff going on. This just helped me get nervous at home so that when I got to the studio, I'd already been there in my head. I've already been there, done that. I know what this place is like. And even then, there's still going to be surprises. The way it sounds, it was freezing in there, all that stuff. I was much less surprised and much more relaxed about things. So get into the room. If you know where you're going to write an exam, if you can physically go there, great. If you at least can kind of picture what's it going to be like. Is it a room with 300 desks and it's dead silence? Is it quieter? Get those out of your system as soon as you can so you know what you're going to need to what you're going to be feeling like that day, right? This is the night before. I was in my hotel in LA, and that's me saying, I'm going to be there. It still seemed weird. It seems weird now, but I'm like, there's, whenever you've ever pointed at a TV show and said, I'm actually going to be physically at that part in 24 hours. So I did it. It really, really helped me just feel like, yeah, I'm part of this group. I'm part of these people. And as I said, celebrate the fact that you've made it that far and you deserve to be there. If you're writing an exam, if you're going for an interview, whatever it is, not everybody gets that chance. You've done something right to get yourself to that point, and just making it on that stage and making it in that room is a huge accomplishment to take advantage of. And a little bit of trivia, if you ever noticed, all the contestants on Jeopardy are pretty much the same height. And it's not because they ask you your height when you're applying, it's because of this. You get to stand on a little riser that goes up and down electronically. So that's what they do to make sure everyone's at the same eye level. I talked about nutrition and taking care of yourself physically. Good food, physical activity are part of study skills. You need to have, you're a machine, you're an engine. Make sure you're treating yourself right. And it comes in a lot of forms. It's what you're eating. And I'm not saying you have to have a perfectly clean, doctor recommended diet, but just be aware of how you're managing your time, your food, your exercise, your movement, and relaxation. Those are all important. Your goal, you want to have a steady level of energy, a good mood, and keeping your cool, because those are when you can stop worrying about how you're feeling and focus on what you're trying to prepare for and study. This is my dinner the night before. I wanted cookies and chocolate bars, especially when you go to the States and get all their unique chocolate bars. Man, did I ever want it. But I had fruit and vegetables and healthy rice bowls. It probably did me better because I was just in a better mood the next day. I've talked about simulating the test environment. Don't let the details get to you. Another picture of the studio, which still gives me that anxiety. The day before we went to the studio, I took a test drive. It's LA. I don't know the routes. I don't know traffic. I don't know about parking. But going there the day before meant that I didn't have to think about that on the big day. I've done it. Now I'm familiar. So I spent enough time just going to that test environment to really check it out. So that's what I say. Go to the place where the magic will happen. It's practice, it's a drill, but you're right on the doorstep of this actually happening. So I wanted to show you, what happened.
Before its 1959 opening, 21 artists protested its design, saying it would make paintings look tilted and askew. 30 seconds. Good luck.
30 seconds good luck is, man, do I ever get nervous still hearing that now. And I'm going to just show you what the outcome was.
Ujal Thakor was in second place with 14,400. And he knew it was the Guggenheim. He's going to add 6,800. You are now in the lead with $21,200. Once again, it comes down to Margaret Shelton. You're going to need to be correct again, Margaret. Your response was the Guggenheim, twice for neatness. Did you wager enough? $5,000 gives you $24,400 today and a two-day total of $41,000.
That was tough. Even watching it now, that was not the most fun experience in that moment. And you're allowed to, let that throw you off and feel it. But it also gave me time after I filmed. You've got 2 months between when you film and when it goes on TV to really just keep it to yourself and think about it and process how did it go. And that's just the outcome. So we'll talk a bit about reflecting in a second here. But I talked about preparing for surprises. Well, don't let small surprises throw you off your game. For me, an example, I was going to I was going to this big studio. It's a millions and millions of dollar production. You think it's gonna be glamorous. This is TV, right? You think this is the big leagues, so it's gonna be amazing. They're gonna treat us well, and I'm gonna show you the incredible VIP area they had us for during the morning and afternoon, where we had breakfast and lunch. We were waiting for our turn to be called onto the game. It's the second story of a parkade. And that's partly because of COVID rules. We had to keep ourselves separate, but we just had to sit here and look at the back of someone else's head for hours. So not the most glamorous thing. The other thing, think about what can go wrong. Yeah, some things might go wrong. My pen breaks, my calculator battery dies, whatever. But don't overthink it. For Jeopardy, of course, you're thinking about the game, but you're also thinking, I'm on TV with 11 million people watching. I don't want to become a meme like this poor guy. So early on in his game, he'd only given one answer. He got it right, and it was about Nickelback. So of course, people thought that was kind of funny. The good news for this guy is he won. So, but you don't always want to become that kind of a meme. You still have to have fun with it, though. So you've done it. I want to talk a bit about reflection and what you do. So quick question for people, again, throw it in the chat or come off mute. What do you do to reflect after you've done something like a big exam or a major event?
I'm going to still the airways because nobody's talking. I know with my students that I work with, we love to go through a midterm or an exam review reflection to just go through exactly that process. Like, how did you feel? How prepared were you going into this? And taking that time to actually kind of digest what went well and maybe what didn't go so well. And I think that makes a big improvement of what you can look at to when you perform on your next exam.
In the chat here, we've got talk about the implications either with myself or others. Whatever is done, let it go.
Absolutely. It's you can only control so many things. You can control how you prepare. You can control what you do in the exam room. The minute you walk out, that's out of your hands, and you have to be ready with that, or to accept that for sure.
This is a good one. I've already written 2 finals and I've gotten 2 more to go. I usually reward myself in some way, going out with my friends, going to do a sport, and normally I reflect in some sort of journal. And another great one, talk with friends about how we think we did and how we might do better.
Love it. I love these ideas. These are all absolutely, they feel like the right things to be doing for yourself to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So again, you've done it. Now it's so, and seeing the answers and hearing the answers makes me feel like I have the right thing too. But think about how it went. Right after the exam, it's still fresh in your mind. What were you happy with? What would you change? What do you keep for next time? And how did you feel? Did you feel like you had the right level of preparation and energy and anxiety? It's okay to be a little nervous in any of these exams, but did you feel overwhelmed or did you feel good, and why, right? And as I said, recognize what you've accomplished. If you've made it to that final exam, it's because you've been doing everything right all semester and you've been preparing yourself to get in there. You deserve to be in that room, and this is your chance to really shine. Not everybody gets that chance to make it to that advanced class or anything like that. You're allowed to be unhappy. Like I said, I had a screen grab of my face as I realized I wasn't going to win that Jeopardy game. And it was not a happy face, but that's what it is. And you got to try to find the positive. Did I do everything to the best of my ability? Absolutely. I answered questions. I wagered the way I thought was right. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't hurt myself, right? It's still, if it's competitive, no matter what you're competing against, just make sure that you're being fair to yourself. But you don't have to just walk out smiling every time. You're allowed to be unhappy, but then work with it, right? Manage the what ifs and if onlys. There's always going to be that. What if I had spent more time studying this topic? What if I had answered question 5 instead of question 4? For me, what if I had gotten that clue instead of her? What if I had gotten the daily double? What if I put a bit more money on my wager? Go through it all, because they can be learning experience and say, well, next time I'll do it differently. That's great. If it becomes a learning experience for you, then it's definitely worth it. And then that's exactly it. Think about what worked for you. Did your study habits help you? Were you measuring and tracking yourself properly and throughout the whole process of studying and preparing? And the most important question, what will I do the same and differently next time? So to finish up, I just want to review some of the things I wanted to make sure you all take away from in what we've talked about today. So kind of repeating what I've said, but make sure you're approaching and planning and preparing in what works best for you. That's going to change over time, but no website or book is going to give you the exact answer of how to prepare. You're going to have to take a lot of different tools and techniques, and you know yourself, and make sure you plan the way that works best. But plan. An hour of planning versus a year of stress. If you have a plan, it's okay to deviate from it and say, yeah, I'm a little bit behind. But if you had no plan, you have no idea how well you're going to be ready on the big day. Take care of yourself. Let other people help you out. You're studying material. You're studying academic stuff that's in the textbook, what you learned in class. But when you're writing an exam or any other big event, it's only part of it is about the material. The other part is, how am I going to perform in that room, on that stage, across from that person, right? There aren't always shortcuts, but sometimes there are. Use them. Don't be afraid to use tricks that you learn from other people, from books, from classes. Take advantage of that, right? Measure your performance, do what you need to do, and celebrate yourself. Celebrate the fact you're about to write something. When you walk out of the room, celebrate it. I know, Alexander, you mentioned going out with friends, giving yourself a treat. Absolutely. Do that. You deserve it for yourself. And hopefully I've been able to reinforce this is not just about, those of you who are writing your diplomas right now or finals. It's not only about finals. It's about so many big things in life, whether they're a direct test of you or a challenge, but make sure that you're always thinking about things in terms of being, am I bringing my best self forward? Am I as prepared as I want to be? And am I doing the absolute best I can? Can I be proud of what I've achieved? So with that, I know we have a little bit of time, and I'm happy to take any questions and answers, or of course it's Jeopardy, so it's answers and questions, but I'd love to hear anything that you all have have questions for me.
There was a question earlier, Ujal, and I'm just going to go back. This is from Dina. For learners, sorry, just hang on a sec. It was something about when you're applying your study strategies and looking at programming, if you use the same approach for like logic type questions. Let me just find it here, sorry.
Sure.
There was also a question about how long do you study for? Like not necessarily months or weeks in your case, but your study block time is how I interpreted that question. When you built that study plan, like.
So for that CFA, I mean, I was working at the time. So what I said, I talked to people, and the average consensus was 10 to 15 hours a week for the 3 to 4 months, which, it's quite a long time. And then as you get closer, you're blocking off time. So for those exams, every year I would take the full week up to the exam completely off. And I had this routine that worked for me. Again, it depends on what works best for people, but I would find a room in the business school at the U of C. There were some closed off rooms. They were nice size. They were private. And I would show up at 6 a.m. on the dot. I had all my books, my computer, my food, everything. And I barely left that room. And 6 till 6, it was just cram, study, practice. And at 6, go home, 1 hour for dinner, and then 5 more hours of that. And it was brutal, but I was able to make it work. That isn't always going to work for everybody, but I like that. For Jeopardy, you accumulate knowledge over time, you kind of play along here and there. But when I had the call and said, you've got 4 weeks to get on, I had one advantage that it was over the holidays. So I already had time off work and, people were traveling. So it was a lot easier for me to just shut everything else out. It made for a pretty quiet Christmas and New Year's, I'll say, but I had the advantage of having that time. And I was spending, again, 15 to 18 hours getting ready for it. You can't do that long term. Even 4 weeks is exhausting. And I made sure that right as I got up to the big day, I actually slept a lot more and gave myself rest, because there's no sense in having knowledge, but being so tired you can't get to it at the time. Adina's question, preparing for trivia, same as aptitude with logic and math. It is, because for trivia, a lot of it is about making connections, especially when they're asking questions in a tricky way. You need to be able to decipher, what are you really asking? There could be a 2-sentence question, and all they're asking, what's the capital of Norway? But they don't say that. So part of it was practicing around that and making sure that my brain was getting to the real answer as much as I could. In terms of how it includes like logic and math, definitely. Because especially things that are logic based, or there's formulas, there's a clear right answer, there's a right way of doing things. Absolutely. It was just training my brain. Again, the point someone had made about biological processes. If you memorize the process, anything they ask you about it, you're gonna sort of jump to that right part and say, I know what happens in step 25. And so I can easily skip all the noise and get right to the heart of what you're asking me.
Ujal, thank you for that. Like, such great advice. Super packed. Alexandra's wondering if she can ask you a question.
Absolutely.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time. I really appreciate it. And it's so cool that I got to see the clips, because I didn't even know that there was so much to Jeopardy and the process and everything. That was just so cool to see. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. One's about studying and one's more about your Jeopardy experience.
Totally.
So one of the questions I have is, do you believe in overstudying at all? Because I'm taking physics and math at the same time right now. And there are two topics specifically that I feel like, oh, I don't know, but I keep going over it and I still feel like, I don't know everything that I should. Like, I definitely know the basis, but I don't know how to get over knowing everything rather than just the base. And then I'm not sure if you're allowed to, but would you ever go on Jeopardy again?
So on the first one, I'd say overstudying. The reason they talked a lot about testing yourself and checking where you're strong and weak and all that, I'd say it sounds like if you're trying to remember every single point that was brought up in an entire course, that's probably not going to be the most efficient. Like I said, if you break up your physics and math courses into sub-units and say, well, I'm really strong on some of these things. I'm strong on trigonometry, but I have trouble on graphing quadratic equations. Cool. Leave the other stuff that you're good at to the side. Good is good enough, and it'll be there. And when you're getting close to the exam, you can refresh yourself and it'll be really quick. But in a perfect world, you'd have all the time you want to really get into the weeds, but you don't. You've got 5 different classes you're doing. They all have final exams and they all happen to fall in the same 3 days. You have to be realistic about how much time you can really spend. So I'd say overstudying if you have the time, but you have limited time in your schedule, you have limited brain power and capacity and energy levels. So I would say kind of use that to prioritize where you're spending your effort, if that helps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah, I'm guilty of the same thing. I'd say if I got a couple spare hours, let me just do some more studying. Think about, is it actually productive? Is it the best use of my time? And maybe the answer is yes. Great, then do it. But when you get into the point where you're staring at the page and you've read it 3 times and it's just not clicking and the numbers are kind of jumbling all over, walk away. This is a point when you're saying, I'm not going to learn this in the next hour. But if I do something else that just refreshes me, maybe I'll come back and I get my aha moment. So keep thinking about how you're feeling and how you're doing. Test yourself, check your mood, your energy. Those are just as important as forcing something to stick. Your other question, could I go on? You can't. They don't let you go on a second time unless you're in one of like the tournaments of champions, if you've won a few games and all that. But I did send them a note recently on Twitter saying, it's about time we have a tournament of Canadians because there aren't that many. So I'm crossing my fingers. And if they like it, and I've chatted a couple times with, if you all were watching last year, Matea, who's lives in Toronto and she's from Halifax, and she did an amazing run. I've chatted with her because I said, hey, you're friends with those producers. Maybe you just drop in a good word and say, maybe a couple Calgarians wouldn't hurt to have back on the show. So I'm crossing my fingers, but nothing's committed.
I'd love to see that.
But I feel like if they had a bunch of Canadians, they'd ask about U.S. state capitals, and we'd all be crying by the end.
Oh, that's great. Any more questions for Ujal? We will record this, or we have it recorded. So we will be following up with all of you. We'll send you an email with the information I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, along with the recording. If you want to share that or revisit it, because there was a lot in there. I tried to take notes in the chat, so I'll make sure I download the chat as well so that you can see. I think just by coincidence, we got to 20 strategies. So I was like, wow, we actually hit 20. So
actually, sorry, Samantha, there's 2 questions. Do we have time for me to answer 2 more questions?
Yeah, we do. Okay. We do. If you have to go, no problem. But if go ahead. Who do we? Sure. Oh, Liam.
Liam had a question. How do I figure out what works best for me in terms of study methods and memorization? Trial and error. I think that's really it. Is if you try one method and then test yourself and say, yeah, I got it. It clicked, and I could, if I get to the point where I could actually teach that concept myself, I've probably done really well. If you say, that's maybe a practice. If it's memorization and say, I just can't memorize this list of things or these major facts, I need to use a trick. I love the idea of making up mnemonics, even if they don't make any sense. Make up a word where all the letters kind of give you a clue into what it is. Maybe it's a list of countries or concepts or something. But the best way to figure out what works best for you is test yourself. Keep going back. Don't just try one method and say, I probably have it, so on exam day I'll be good. Test and say, if this was the exam right now, would I have actually nailed it? If not, try a different way. So it's very much a trial and error thing. Lisa, can you have tips on creating a schedule? The visual busyness. Yeah, I'd say, if you Google, like the one you saw, that was done in Microsoft Excel. So it depends on how comfortable you are. If you want to use a whiteboard, pen and paper, Excel, any other tools, you don't let that, technology or whatever get in the way. But I just say just Google a few different ways. You can, if you Google, study schedule template for Excel, you'll get a ton of files. You can download any of those and then customize it to what you want with dates and details and activities. But yeah, absolutely. If it seems too busy, the one I had on screen, that had a lot of stuff going on. It worked for me because I was able to check off a little box and say done, done, done. If you want something that's a bit easier visually, just design it to whatever works for you. Absolutely. But make sure it's realistic and you're able to stick to it and say, if I do this on schedule, cool. If I don't, how am I going to find the extra time to make up for it? Or what if I want to change the order in which I do things? Just give yourself enough time to do that.
There's another one here. Dina. I'm sorry if I'm saying this incorrectly. Your name, is it Dina? I feel terrible if I'm saying.
It's Dina. It's okay.
Dina.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dina. Trying to study IT. It's so much I don't understand and learn that I don't even know I want to continue anymore. Like just feeling demotivated, right? When you're in the thick of it and in the weeds. I'm trying to go slow and study basics and separate topics before I can do a bigger topic or a bigger picture. If you start something from very scratch, how would you plan it?
I'd say for anything you're all studying, there's probably almost nothing that can't be broken down into bite-sized chunks. But sometimes it's daunting at saying, I need to understand how to design, if it's IT, like how to design an entire server structure in a network environment. Well, even I have no idea what that is, but I know that it's made up of smaller parts and smaller parts and processes and equipment and people and responsibilities. So if you think about it that way, I would say just sort of, you almost have to decompose it into different parts. And it's not always easy because if you don't know the subject well, you don't even know where to start. And that's where you rely on people who are experts in the field or your teachers and professors to do that and say, look, I want to understand this big concept, but I feel like if I don't know the basics, I won't get it. What basics do I need to learn? And so someone else can help you work to build out the order in which you learn about something or study it.
I think that linking part you mentioned, where I think in IT too, you get that overarching piece and then there's all the breaking down. So the breaking down, and if you can make that visual somehow, like a massive whiteboard, it's, I'm constantly going on about the whiteboard for studying, but I think it's so important to get the massive whiteboard and like really drill down what are all those components. And you might not know what those are, but then as you're progressing through, you can start to connect this component to this component to this component, I would imagine, and start to make sense of what that process is. Okay,
like
I know your time is super valuable, and I so appreciate you dedicating your generosity of time, sharing your time and your brain with us. And Ujal, you truly are a gem. I know we've all benefited today. And again, if you do have questions for Ujal, feel free to send them to me. We might rope him in for another session at some point. We are very thankful. I'm sure you're going to get more registrations if Dr. Maida's still on. Just so you know, we could get more registrations for Ujal's to view his topic today. So you could be into the millions by next weekend, I think.
I hope
really
so.
appreciate it. Thank you for representing Canada and Calgary so well. Seeing you, I think another lady was saying too, like watching you made me nervous. I was like, if I was watching you like months later feeling nervous, I can't even imagine what mindset you must have had to push through that. So congratulations. I love how you tied this into like, it was a parallel for life and for learning. And yes, it was about Jeopardy. And yes, it was like a huge goal, but the general piece is like, you aim high and you just kept going and you persevered from right from the beginning when they said no over and over again to now where now you're sharing. And that mindset, I think, especially for our students who often feel like insurmountable amounts of stress. I know in our practice, that's something we're really working hard with our students on, is that, you know, boiling the ocean and feeling like one decision is so consequential. And you're living proof that it actually can lead you to success and better and better. So we do appreciate you and your time. And thank you, everybody, for making time on your Saturday to join us today.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions and feedback during the session as well. And thanks for your time.
Have a great day, everybody.